Hi, everyone. Welcome to EBG in the Know. I'm Eugenie Basalko, and I have finally managed to schedule my third episode of this YouTube broadcast. Today, I have with me someone that I've known for a few years. His name is Monty, and he's not showing himself today on camera because of the story that we want to share. But um, the reason I'm doing this interview is because of the story that he will share, and because I thought it was important that perhaps people learn from this, and hopefully we avoid some things happening that have been happening lately, and for actually the past several years as a result of uh, a misunderstanding of an, uh, a plant, an herbal, some consider remedy uh, by the name of kratom, I believe it's pronounced, and it's from uh, it has an ingredient in it called metragenine, I believe it's pronounced. And this actually has some euphoric effects at times and some calming effects at other times. And then in extremely high doses has some very, very detrimental effects to the body. So I invited Monty here to share that. With you, and I'll let him introduce himself, and then I'll ask some questions along the way. So, Monty,
Hi, Eugenie. Yeah, I'm Monty, and
thanks for coming.
yep, I'm glad to be here.
Thank you. Um, so so my understanding is that you and many other people that kratom is often given or suggested to people as a way to get off of other drugs. Was that your experience?
Um, no, it wasn't. I was introduced to it by somebody who at least had started doing it that way, and then after a while, he got to the point where he was just kind of in a holding pattern and taking it every few hours, but also indulging in it sometimes at night when he'd be drinking. And so we were having a night of drinking, and he introduced it to me.
Got it. Um, so I mean, I want to hear about that first night, but just just a little interlude here. Many people watching, I would imagine, have seen signs for kratom. Like they kind of blur in the background. If you're not like looking for it, maybe you're not seeing it, but it usually you would see signs for kratom at little shops where they're selling CBD products, or where they're selling herbal things or vitamins or um cannabis, or am I right? Has that been your experience?
Yeah, I mean, as far as I can tell, it tends to vary state to state. But here where I am in Virginia, it's in every smoke shop
Got
pretty
it.
much. So it would be where CBD is, where vapes are, um, and I guess there are some edible type things that they have here. I mean, it's very just edible THC and anything like that. You'll see a sign that for kratom as well. And I say
Right.
kratom. Some people say kratom. I don't know really what it is. I've heard people say both.
Got it. Yeah, it doesn't really roll off the tongue.
Right.
regardless. Um,
Right.
um, yeah, I mean, Kratom would make sense because I saw this. I was confused in doing research for this interview. Um, some people have referred to it to me as crave or crave.
Mm.
And then when I looked up crave, there's an entirely other sort of following and website devoted for a product to a product called Krav, Krav. Um, and I'm not sure if there's a relationship between these two products or not, but they both seem associated with um, calming effects slash dangerous side effects if abused, slash not necessarily being FDA approved,
Mm.
and go and kind of being sold in this kind of, I don't want to be dramatic, but like this underworld of you know when stuff isn't quite illegal, but maybe it's like it's kind of still being researched. So
Yeah. I
yeah,
mean,
I
I
mean,
think, look, I think the fact that people are still differ on the way they pronounce it just kind of represents something about it in general. I mean,
100%.
it's just, yeah, it's sort of the great unknown. And I've, had some experiences where I've exchanged messages with people online. And I mean, there are some people out there who are very educated on it, or at least come across as being very educated on it. But there's a lot of it is still unknown. Um, it is pretty sketchy, and no matter how you slice it. And so I don't know. I'm sure that people will fill us in if they want to.
Yeah. Okay, why don't without further ado, I apologize for that digression, but why don't you tell us about, you know, either that first experience or going forward what ended up happening with you and
Yeah, I
Kratom.
mean, well, the guy that I knew that introduced me to it, first of all, I'd never heard of it. Um, it didn't even ring any bells. And he got it from, a drug dealer, who got it online from God knows where. Um, so he was not buying it at stores at the time. But when I came back to Virginia, I saw that it was at stores. And so, and this is probably 6 or 8 months later, um, when I decided to get it on my own and try it. And at that time, the first time, I should go back to the first time, it was a very opioid like effect. I'd certainly had some experience doing opioids before. They certainly weren't my thing. I didn't really like them. I didn't like having to take pills when I would get some sort of injury. So I didn't, um, some people can't imagine that they would ever leave some left in the bottle if they get an injury. They're going to take them because it helps with pain, but also because they like the feeling that they get. And I could kind of take it or leave it. Um, and, pills, at least I really didn't care for. So that first night when I took it, it prolonged the drinking experience. And that was the majority of the fun of it. Um, I always think of Kratom as giving a little 5 or 10% boost energy wise, and that even goes for the Kratom that's kind of geared towards a relaxing feeling. Um, any kind of Kratom gives me some kind of energy boost, and it's like a 5 or 10% little boost. For me, it wasn't euphoric. Um, it just was a nice little thing to do that night, and kept me up for a long time.
So a
Not
stimulant, like a heavy duty coffee.
Yeah. Um, right. With some sort of mixed in with some calming effects. I mean, it's a little bit like alcohol, and that alcohol can serve as a stimulant and a depressant all at the same time. So it had a little bit of that. Um, and yeah, like a lot of coffee, but also, and another charm of it was just feeling a bit different. So that's always been that was an attraction to it too. That first night was, it just felt a little bit different, but certainly reminded me of an opioid um, in its effects. It made it. Um, I noticed that first night it made it a little, and this is not the prettiest thing, but made it a little hard to go to the bathroom,
Okay.
and that really reminded me of an opioid. Um, it also it made me a little bit constipated.
Yep.
Um, so there were those things that I kind of noticed um, from years before having done opioids. I'm trying to think of another effect, but it's hard to describe. It just felt very similar.
Got it. I mean, backing up, like uh, sorry if this comes across as offensive.
No,
But you seem to know your drugs. So if you want to just
yeah, I
maybe
mean,
tell us what a little bit about where you were at that point when you tried it in terms
well, I
of
hadn't done Yeah, I mean, I hadn't done any kind of street opioid in a long time, but I had experience doing them. And so those effects really kind of, because I didn't know really why this guy was taking it. So I didn't, I mean, call me stupid and, ignorant and anything else. And I guess you've got a point, but it had his okay, and so I took it, and then later I found out that he'd been taking it to his doctor had cut him off from OxyContin or whatever he was taking, and so he was getting kratom and using it to kind of get by, um, and also, like I said, using it for a bit of a kick at times, um, and it had been probably 20 years since I'd used any kind of like street opioid, but it it was really the effect was very much the same. I don't remember how much I used. He was using the kratom that comes in powder form. Um, and like I said, 6 or 8 months later, when I decided to get it on my own, it was from a store, and I got the liquid shots of it. And I think I got one or two of them, but they were and are about 20 or $22 a pop. They're very small. There are different brands of them, and they're these little shots of liquid.
how long does that
Kratom.
effect last from one 22 buck shot? How what do you get from that?
Um, I would say that first time it was the majority of the rest of the day. So if it was noon or 2 o'clock in the afternoon or some point, I was feeling it for until well into the evening. That would change later on, but and those are strong. The liquid tends to be strong.
Hmm.
Um, it also tends to be very stimulating. So that was one difference between what I took when I got back um, to where I live and what I had taken um,
Your
with this
friend.
friend of mine, was that it it was more stimulating, and the shots tend to be stimulating. If you get kratom at a store, you can get pills, you can get powder, and you can get shots. And even down here in Virginia, they sell shots at gas stations. And
And of
I know
course,
that.
it's being sold in like in teas and stuff like that, right?
True, true.
Okay.
Yeah.
Uh,
And I
um,
have I have almost no experience with that, but I have taken it in powder and the pills and the shots and all that.
okay. I mean, yeah, for me, what you're describing is very paradoxical because, you're describing something that's very stimulating and yet calming. I mean, like, I think about how I feel when I drink too much coffee. I get like heart palpitations and I definitely do not feel calm. Um, I mean, the whole reason that I wanted you to come on my show is to talk about this because, there have been upwards of, I don't know what the count is now, but 100 or more deaths like a
Mm,
year, I believe, if I'm
mm,
not mistaken. And most recently there and you can look it up. There's lawsuits. I'm sure you've seen some.
mm,
But the most recent one that I heard of was in July of 2023. A woman was kind of taking it like middle-aged and older women take gummies a lot these
mm,
days, I've heard, or mushrooms. It was like that for her. It was like her nightly glass of wine, and then, she just up and dies. So that's I don't know. I'm trying to piece all this together. Like if you can get so many different effects from it, like it's
yeah.
so confusing as
And
to
there and there and then and there are, you know, um, forms of it that kind of play to one effect more than the other.
okay.
So and they coincide with different colors. So you'll get a red strain or you can get a green strain. The green strain tends to be more stimulating. The red strain seems to be more calming, but it is um, it can be a little bit of a catch-all. And I have had experiences with it, especially the shots where I've been left kind of shaky. And I mean, I had to leave work one day because I couldn't type. I literally couldn't type anything on a keyboard because my hands were shaking so bad. And so it's it's a difficult thing to figure out. Not everybody experiences it the same, of course. Um, and there's so much that's kind of foggy about it, and so little good information out there, that it is um, it is a bit spooky in that way. And the one thing that I always remember is when I finally when I finally did get off it, the first doctor I saw that night at the hospital told me, he's like, "Oh yeah, I take kratom too." And that was the first guy that treated me that night at intake at the emergency room. And when I've mentioned that, a lot of people will say, well, okay, but a doctor might also have a drink sometimes, and alcohol can be very scary, too. And that doctor, I doubt was taking kratom in the amounts that I was, for sure. But um, when you're just kind of going about it yourself, and there aren't many people around you that are knowledgeable, when you're finding things out for yourself, it can things can get sideways pretty quick, and they certainly did for me. I realized that people who like kratom and still use it can get very defensive, and I've heard from some of them online at least. But with so many unknowns, I just feel like if you're trying to deal with anxiety, if you're trying to deal with some pain, there might be some more sure-footed ways to go about it than this stuff. That's my only real opinion on it, um, from the experience that I had, which was harrowing.
Tell me what the e- amounts were that you ended up be relying on.
Yeah, I mean, I want to say that, it was the first year, by the end of the first year, it was about a 3 ounce bag of powder a day. By the end of the second year, it was two of those. By the end of the third year, it was three of those. So I was about 9 or 10 ounces by that third year, um, of the powder. And then I would also do a shot or two, which would, add something on top of all that. And money wise, it got to between 80 and $120 a day.
And so the powder you'd put into another drink,
Yeah, I would just put it into a bottle and put water in there and shake it up.
and
Um,
and
the,
people
the
around you, what do they think you're drinking? Do they know you're drinking this thing or
well, I mean, I was pretty secretive about it, but there were times at work where, I mean, I think it was somewhat visible, and I just think they didn't really know. It could be maybe any type of um, you know, shake that you've concocted, or, health
herbal
drink of,
supplement?
yeah, herbal something or other. Yeah.
Y-
So,
Yeah, I that's that. So and how long? Sorry, I'm at a loss for words.
yeah.
That's, I mean, that's expensive. That's scary. That's um. So I need to know, I guess, A, what made you realize that you were actually
Hooked.
addicted to the substance? Yeah, and then what got you past that, and how much time are we past that now?
Um, well, the first question first, I mean, I was using it so much that I didn't really give myself enough time to see whether I was physically addicted to it or not, but I was suspecting that whole time. And so about halfway through that third year, I decided, like, okay, you're going away for a bit. Why don't you just, not bring any kratom with you and see what happens? I was a little bit, anxious about what was going to happen, but I didn't realize that it was going to be as bad as it was. I mean, I ended up on a couch in someone's house that night, just literally kicking. I mean, they talk about trying to kick drugs, but it was, literally my body wouldn't stay still. I couldn't get it to stay still. And it was like writhing. And so you just end up, it's these little kicks actually, because your body's just going in 1,000 different directions at the same time. So at that point, obviously I knew. Um, and I
So
was
you
just kind of
were
like,
aware. It wasn't like a seizure where you're not really conscious.
no, I
You're
was hyper
conscious.
aware. Yeah. No,
Okay.
completely aware. Yeah. I mean, much more aware than I wanted to be, for sure. I mean, it just was, and this whole time, you got to understand, this whole time it's happening with something which I didn't ever really think was my thing. I mean, there are substances that that bring me a certain amount of euphoria, alcohol being one of them, which it does for a lot of people. This happened with something that I never fell in love with, that never became a source of joy, in the way that substances can for some people. This was something that I used partly because I'm like, you know what? This is the kind of thing that you really have never had a problem with. And it was just that classic move of going towards something because you think it's less dangerous, and then getting in more trouble with that than you ever did with anything else. Um, so it was about 6 months after that night. And by the way, that morning, that I ended up in withdrawal. I mean, the morning, I couldn't get it quickly enough. I mean, I was out hunting around for it. I was in a different state, so I was worried about whether I'd be able to get it or not. Um, but I did, and so obviously then I knew, and it was just a matter of what I could do about it. And I tried to stop using it on my own, of course, and that didn't work. Tried seeing a doctor to get some things that would help with the withdrawals. That didn't work. And so, about 6 months after that night, I drove myself to the emergency room and spent about 5 days in detox. Um, and, just shaking my head the whole time, like, how did I get here with this? How did I get here with a substance that I felt okay about using at first because I wasn't out driving all messed up. I wasn't, you know, it wasn't affecting my judgment. Um, at least in non-kratom related things, it wasn't affecting my judgment, but it wasn't affecting my judgment in the way alcohol does. Wasn't affecting the way that I drive the way something like alcohol can. It wasn't illegal. Um, it was something that I could get legally and not, look around to see who was watching. I didn't have to worry about cops stopping me. I didn't have to worry about acting all strange around people because it didn't make me act strange, really. Um, I mean that it's possible that certainly that somebody thought I was taking something, but I never had anybody ask. I never had anybody kind of look at me funny. Um, the only thing was a nurse where my mom was, at a hospital where my mom was, I think, saw my pupils. And, of course, like opioids, the pupils get super, super small. They get like little pinpricks. And I think she got a look at my pupils and knew that I was on something. But even she didn't say anything to me. So I thought this was smooth sailing, and it could kind of coincide with a life where I wasn't drinking anymore, where I wasn't using anything else, where I wanted to be an adult, and I wanted to be chill. And even the idea of using something that was a bit odd, or that was not mainstream, was kind of intriguing because it seemed like somebody who is into all things herbal, or it seemed okay, and obviously it wasn't. So I mean, they call it gas station heroin or gas station oxy. I mean, it's got nicknames now, most of which I'm not aware of, but yeah, it was something else, man. It was a hell of a ride. It was a bitch to get off of. um
How long did it take to get off of, and how long has it been since?
Well, I the last time I took it was around Christmas of 2020. Um, And, I walked out of detox 5 days later, but then began the adventure of being on the stuff that they gave me to get off it. And you know, so that, that's, I mean, that's an adventure in itself. And I don't want to go on and on about that, but it began a whole odyssey that I'm still dealing with. So this isn't really past tense. I mean, I'm even though the kratom use is past tense, I'm still taking what I was given to get off it. So
Do you think that
yeah, man, it was something.
you're dependent upon that?
Yep, yep. And so, I'm now getting treatment for that, and stepping down on the dosage of that, but it's difficult. Um, and sometimes I wish that I had just tried to get off the kratom cold turkey, but the condition that I was in that first day of detox, I mean, I was so happy to have something to use to get off it. And I mean, that day I wouldn't have made any other choice. That was the only choice I could make at that time. Now, looking back on it, which I try not to do too much, looking back on it, it has been really difficult to go about it this way and do it long term, and to still be dealing with it um, this many years later. But I'm just happy that I'm not taking kratom anymore, because it was something that I had to deal with every 3 or 4 hours. And it just, by the end, if I didn't, it just acted so quick, and I went into withdrawals so quickly. And that's the thing with kratom, is that um, it really needs upkeep. I mean, you really have to tend to that every few hours. At least I did. I can only talk about my own situation. So um, it was almost constant, and involved a ton of planning. Okay.
Uh, yeah, I mean, thanks for taking us down that road. That was it's it's really, really informative. I, I guess I want to know um how the friend is that introduced you to this in the first place. Like, what's his experience with, is it mirroring yours? Is it completely different?
Um, well, circumstances brought us apart. I can only say that I think he ended up having to kick in a jail cell. So things didn't work out too well for him. Um, and I haven't talked to him lately, but yeah, his road was anything but smooth. And so there, things could have gone worse. And the only thing that I want to say is that, like, you know, I can only I can only speak about how it was to me. I'm not trying to say what the experience is like for anybody else. Um, Kratom certainly has its defenders out there,
Well,
and some of them
so
in
did,
Congress probably.
I
But
mean, yeah, but
that
Monty,
was that was
to
my
be fair,
experience
I
with
mean,
it.
like, there's so many things out there that, you know, that don't work for some and that do work for others. And you're going to have like people defending, you know, murderers. And so, I mean,
Yeah.
uh, yeah, I mean, I wouldn't
Yeah,
feel
you're right.
bad. I wouldn't feel bad if I were you about damning a a a non-human substance, so you offend somebody that really likes it and wants to wear the t-shirt. But I mean, like you're explaining what happened to you. I mean,
Yeah, right.
um, and
And people, the argument that I've gotten is, well, if you weren't taking so much of it, you wouldn't have had that problem with it. And it's not like I started out taking that much. So, it was never my plan to end up taking that much. But once that dependence built up, that's when I ended up having to do to avoid getting horribly, horribly physically ill. So, it didn't start out that way.
I don't think it I don't think it starts out that way for anybody with addiction issues. I mean, who would
Yeah,
want to be spending upwards of 120 or $150 a day to maintain, or more depending on your substance of choice to maintain
right.
that that level of whatever you're trying to achieve. So, I mean,
Yeah,
I yeah, it doesn't sound like that was your intention at all. But then again, I mean, why would it be? I,
right. Yeah,
aside from hearing it from you about the negatives, my personal experience is I've never tried it. I in New York, as I mentioned, it's pretty ubiquitous in terms of signage for it in these vape shops and such.
hmm
So I don't think there is a lot of information out there on the negative side.
hmm
And that's why I wanted to talk to you, because I heard your story. Um, and then, recently what happened to me is that my husband brought home a drink. It was like like it looked like a Starbucks cup, one of those plastic cups with the straw coming out of the top. And
hmm
it was about halfway empty. And he doesn't really drink um, anything other than really water, honestly,
Yeah.
for the most part. So that was weird. And I asked him about it, and he said, well, this colleague of his at work had um, just arrived, and he picked him up at the airport and had asked if they could go um, searching for this particular substance that he was in need of. Um, and Mike didn't know anything about it, so he said, "Well, okay, sure." And went driving the fellow around, and they eventually found it, even though it was a shaded up, like closed up storefront, like, knock knock in a certain way. Wait, we don't like your knock. I try your knock again, kind of, weirdo situation. They eventually get the stuff, and it's like, oh, okay, we like you. You're cool. We'll give you what you need. And then they sent him home with, I guess, in addition to whatever his friend brought home, he got a couple of the liquid drinks, the teas, um and I said, what is that? And he said, I don't know, something crab, I don't know. And I was like, dump it immediately.
mm
And he did. And so he'd only had half, and he dumped the rest. And it was because of your having told me the story that
mm
my red light went off, or whatever you call it. And but I don't think people normally are going to get that warning. I don't
Yeah.
think there's a lot of information, and I
And you ne
really worry.
and you never know if you're going to be the one that this sort of thing happens to. I mean, you can't know that going in. You can tell yourself, I don't have an addictive personality. I don't like opioids. I don't, you know, you can tell yourself all these things, but um, you don't know going in what your response to it is going to be, and it can be so stealthy. Um, and you know, I can tell myself 1,000 times I should have seen it coming, which maybe I should have, but it was awfully stealthy and awfully good at tricking me. So you know,
I
and yeah,
I'll let you finish your sentence.
yeah, no, I mean the only information that I'd gotten about it, and this was the day after I first took it, was by a guy who's now in and out of jail cells. So I mean, there you go.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, obviously, hindsight is
Right,
different from what you were experiencing at the time. I mean,
right.
I
It's a
the
wonderful
first,
thing, hindsight.
yeah, it's really amazing how it works. Um, I just want to say thank you for coming on and being brave enough to share that story. I'll try to put some links, on the description of this episode. Uh, but really, really appreciate
Yeah.
your coming on, even though we didn't see your gorgeous face. I I know that like a story like this is not easy to tell, and and it's really, it's not because it's because it's always ongoing, right? Everybody's story continues until it doesn't continue anymore. So um you have to really it takes a lot of
Yeah.
courage to share that. So thank you
Right.
for doing that.
Sure.
Um I
Yeah.
thanks to those
Thank
of you.
you. Appreciate it.
Yeah, I'm hopefully we share this with people that benefit from it, and thanks to my audience and subscribers of EBG in the Know, and I'll see you next time. Thanks again, Monty. Bye, everyone.